Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first monthly session of the new school year. Today we will have two presentations of our internal projects, Winds of Berkana and Echo. Since we don't have time to waste, I will pass the microphone to the Winds of Berkana team, since they will be starting their presentation.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Unfortunately, Andrea is not able to be here, but we will pass something that he passed to us. Sorry, there's some technical issues here.
Hi, my name is André Antunes, and I'm here, and I'm really happy to be presenting to one of our longest projects here on GDT, called Winds of Berkana. Our main objective with this presentation is to give you an overall of our work and to give you some insight and tips about the main challenges of a long-term project and a big developing team. We had our first meeting at 6th of September of last year, after I pitched the idea and formed the team with those that were interested. And along the way we had a total of 13 devs, but right now we only have 11 active ones since Patricia and Julia have stepped down due to professional reasons. So as you can see, it's been a year with a reasonable big team for our standards. But how it all started, you can question now, and most importantly, how does a project start? Well, it all began with a concept, of course. That's what a game needs to come alive, as you might know. Game design is not an exact science. There are several concepts you can begin with, for example, art style, an idea for an art style, for a narrative, for a gameplay mechanic, a target audience, or a specific user experience. Every single one of them is important to the final project, but the starting one will always be the most important and the one that will drive through forward. And for Winds of Berkana, the first design ideas were the world experience, the world and the experience, the user experience that I wanted to create for the players that would play our game. This image actually was very influential in coming up with this idea, and here you can feel the depth of an uncharted world where there are signs of civilization, but we can easily imagine that mankind is gone and all is left is this empty space with old bastions that we can explore. I was always fascinated with games like Journey, Shadow of Colossus, and Fragile Dreams that dealt a lot with exploration and isolation of the main character. It's almost like a child's feeling of wonder, of exploring something so big and unexplainable, and doing it alone. That's something that always captivated me. And that's what I wanted this game to capture, this game to give to those who played, and to empower the player to feel more like a child. And what better way to give this feeling than to give it some fantasy brushes, like flying boats and whales and magic beings in the world that make us feel so small. And those all those ideas are incorporated on a game and are really important for us to give this experience to the player. And this is really the main concept of the game: a child that is looking for answers about mankind's disappearance while alone, exploring a huge world populated by these gigantic structures of old. But of course, one thing is to idealize a game, The other is to actually make one that is playable and enjoyable to the players. So the art and music are two of the most important aspects of this game, because that helps the player to immerse in its world, and we can look at good examples of this like Journey, Abzu, and Rhyme that make that feeling that the art and music are all incorporated in one huge concept and help the player to immerse in the game. However, besides that, the idea of a flying boat that we had from the early on, just to give you a bit of information, some concepts of this idea for the game came up from our recruitment process, from me, Renata, and João Patricio. But that game was more focused on a multiplayer experience or co-op experience between two players, and this game was more idealized to be a solo experience and much more narrative based. But besides the art and music, this idea of flying a boat was really something that felt fresh and enjoyable, and I wanted it to be an important and well-designed concept of this game, to make it a bit more challenging than the gameplay of the games that I mentioned before. So now we have to balance these several components. Of course, the narrative and the world building are the main ones, the main strengths, to make the player explore the world and to feel a level of awe and wonder and curiosity. But after that, we have an emotional story that accompanies the child alone in this world, and we want the player to share his fears and his objectives. And of course, lastly, we have a gameplay that must be captivating, simple but enjoyable, that will help the players explore and advance the story. And this gameplay will have two components. The one that's a flying boat that will go throughout the environment, throughout mountain ranges and valleys, and explore this luscious world and fantasy world. And the other one is the one that goes inside the basins and explores and advances a bit the narrative, and lets the player get to know a bit more of the ancient civilization and where mankind is now, if there is any left. Now, of course, the main question is how to give life to these components and join them all in the game together. It seems a bit of a challenge. So perhaps we can start with the part of the world building and the art, and perhaps Renata can help us answer this question.
So, hello once again after this troubled start. Well, regarding the world building and the art that was developed to this game, we made this small vision of what is the strategy that we use to build this world. So basically, we started with some concepts that generate the mood of Berkana, where there was this idea of unexplored realities. We wanted to tell a story of a kid and his companion that is inside a particular world and with particular cultural constraints and history yet to be revealed. So all the art had to breathe these sort of predicaments for general mood. Here you can see the traveling boat, where the interior details, sketchings, and mood boards are essential for a 3D artist to fulfill this idea in the end. And this is the idea of the bastions, the places that serve as checking points of lost civilization and try to integrate all the cultural aspects of the society that got lost in the middle of the process. We have different bastions for different environments. Also, the idea was to imprint several drawings as well that relate not only with the relationship that the lost civilization has with the companion species, but there are some clues that can allow our hero to continue. One of the things, of course, it's really important for 3D artists is the ability to translate our concepts in technical sheets that can allow the 3D artist to fully understand and develop the models, and also can allow the person that does the environments to convey these environments to the materials and the mood of the narrative. So this this is one of the initial drawings that we made for Winds of Berkana. And the funny side of it is that related with this idea of project, I also, as a personal level, I'm using my works for my upcoming thesis. So it's a side project that can be used in a very funny way, and also be integrated with themes. So it's a nice thing. So for the environments, this was this first idea of generating environments that aggregated the idea of awe and exploration, remaining mysteries of that time. This is one bastion location where you can see the environments are very well connected with the idea of water, and also one of the things that I was speaking before, the idea of bastion having materials that consonate with the environments that they are built into. So this is like the starting point. Eventually, yes, it will appear. The starting point of this other bastion. We started with some vision that was not yet working, but then after we did a map of the place, we decided to change the view, and so it was a very interesting thing to do, and also a very nice clue for the 3D artist that is doing this kind of work. So the image that you see here, it translated to this image, and for the next part, our colleague Patricia will talk a bit about this transition to 3D. Okay.
In creating the 3D environments, we were aiming for rocky formations with epic proportions, and in order to make the character feel small in the environments where he was placed. In terms of shapes, we had a mix of natural and irregular formations, trying to escape a direct realism. The textures are still to be defined. They're not gonna have that much detail, but they're gonna be interesting visual wise, with little details in certain places, and that's gonna be what's gonna be the most interesting about them, since the shapes are gonna be very simple. The vegetation is going to be a very important element when the player is exploring land areas. Um, there are going to be a high environment, and they are made in order to make that place feel full and contrast with the high mountains and open skies.
Characters.
Should I present
Yes,
this part?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. So basically, this is the concept of, for the main character, the young boy that I came up with, since I was actually the one in charge of the character design for the main character. In these turnaround concept sheets, basically you have the main two states for the character. You have him with his coat all zipped up and ready to face the winds that would be while he's riding the boat. And then you have his explorer outfit, where his coat is just tied up around his waist and he's a lot more practical. He has his backpack also to emphasize the fact that he's actually exploring and collecting items and trying to solve puzzles and whatnot. And also the design ideas really came up from a bunch of different inspirations. Basically, I didn't want it to be too obvious, but at the same time tried to make the design not too generic, but still unique in its own way. I also worked on the expression sheets for the character. If you could please click on the next slide. Yes. So basically, since he's a child, I did have a little bit of trouble trying to emphasize the fact that he's still quite innocent. And the fact is, because when I first drew his expression when he was sad, it didn't come off as quite as genuine and as real as it could have. So basically my second attempt, which is in the second image, I really did try my best to show what is actually like a child that's disappointed about something. Obviously throughout his journey, he's going to face a lot of like different challenges, and he's going to face a reality that he probably wasn't prepared for. So therefore, really working on realistic expressions, that is a must. So that's what was done. Besides the main character, oh no, actually before that, the next slide does show the 3D model that's still in the process of making. Since it has a lot of detailed elements, it's still it's not finished, obviously. So this would be an initial prototype for that. And next, besides the main character, we are going to have a sidekick, which is going to be a animal from this world who the main character doesn't know too much about, but basically grows up with, because initially he's found as a baby. These concept sheets are supposed to be him in his adult form. And what is shown there is that his patterns on his wings basically emit this light that shows that this creature is magical, and he will help the main character in his journey, and it's going to be a crucial part of the whole game. And besides that, there is also a 3D model in the makings for it, exactly there. Also the person in charge of it, Manuel, he's made this amazing animation for the expressions that also going to be crucial for the sidekick, because since there's not going to be a lot of dialogue, the facial expressions, even if it's an animal, are going to be exactly what indicates what sort of emotion and what sort of interaction these two people slash creature are going to have throughout the whole story. So yeah, for characters, that's basically it.
I can just talk a bit about our internal workflow is related with this type of structure that we were talking about. And I don't know, maybe we can make it's Afonso next to talk about the gameplay, but maybe we make an ad break in 5 minutes. Do you think so?
Yeah, I think we can make an ad break, and then we will come back
Okay.
to the presentation.
Okay, so thank you. And then in the next part, we will present to you the gameplay, presented also by Afonso.
Here to talk about a little bit about the gameplay, especially the aspects that we are trying to develop in it, that the player is supposed to experience, and also a little bit of how the development of that gameplay is made, and a little bit of the difficulties we came across and how we took them on. So basically, the game is composed of two big parts, one in which you, as the player, control his boat, and you travel along these immense valleys and maps, trying to appreciate the beauty of the world and getting this kind of flowy, comfortable trip throughout these maps. And then in a second part, as the player gets himself inside these big bastions to try to explore them and know a little bit more about the story. The gameplay, for example, of the boat, as you can see on the little GIF that I have there, is more of a flowy sensation. It is supposed to feel good. It is supposed to feel comfortable. There were a lot of aspects that, for example, in the beginning of the development, we wanted to make this these big obstacles or like big gameplays and mechanics. For example, we wanted to put birds that would show us where the wind was, that would affect how the boat would fly and be managed. And for example, we also wanted to make wind tunnels that would make the boat go faster or slower in the process. However, we saw that it wasn't fun, or it got a little bit frustrating to drive the boat that way, and so we had to take them off, substituting them for maybe just rocks that were in front of the boats, or a harpoon that makes the boat go faster with its momentum, grabbing itself to rocks, but it wouldn't take away that flowy feeling of the boat, which is what we really wanted. And so it became really a game for us to just try to manage this flowy sensation that we wanted to pass through the boat without taking away the fun of the whole driving. it was always a challenge of trying to make the boat flying part not just a task that the player uses to go from one place to another between bastions and between places. It was more of how can we make this aspect of the game to be fun to play, but to not take away that whole landscape feeling and flowiness while we try to make it fun, because we never wanted it to be super hard or to make it an actual big challenge every single time that you put your feet on a boat. And then we have the bastions that you can see a bunch of photos over there, which what we want to accomplish with the bastions, it's more of how can we make this this exploration part and this learning of the lore of the world through the bastions, making it fun for the player to explore them, because it's always more of a question of the player is going to go through the bastion and we need to make it fun. So how are we going to make that he wants to explore through the bastions? And so we designed a couple of levels. Yes. This is an example of what we made, one of the many that we try to make schemes of and try to think about on how would our player have to interact with these bastions, not affecting the gameplay of itself, making it especially fun for the player, and not too hard. This is, for example, one of the earlier puzzles that we wanted to implement. It's a very simple one in which the player has to jump from platform to platform down one of the bastion towers, in which he has to reach the end. And for example, in one of the spots of these platforms, there would be one that was missing, and so the player would have to glide, which is a mechanic of our game. The player can glide instead of just jumping, and so to show that mechanic and try to make it fun, try to give a little hint to the player, we wanted to take one of the platforms out so that he would understand that he needs to use that mechanic and take advantage of it. And so it always became a little thing whenever we are trying to design a puzzle in which we have to think of what is the mechanic that the player is going to have to use here in order to accomplish this certain challenge. And I remember that we made like 8, 10, 11 of these puzzles. And whenever we would present them, it would be cut down to 5 or 4, because we always need to take into account a lot of aspects that when we are designing those levels, we don't take them into account. For example, is it going to be fun? Is it going to be too hard? Is the player going to understand what he needs to do? Are we making this too hard as a designer, and we're not really taking the player view in it? We're just thinking of it as a designer of the game and the level, and we're not really taking into account the player's perspective when approaching the level. And so we need to think of all the mechanics we have and of all the mechanics we should use on one level and try to make little changes to the thing. Not the next. And I think that to show a little bit even more of this, how the design process of the gameplay and how the game feels, I can talk a little bit more about my personal part, which is camera. I am responsible to make the camera make the game, show the game as it is supposed to look. Next. And basically you have these 2 images, which is the first one is a mini game that we have in all of the bastions, which is a little vitral gameplay in which the player has to shift these pieces together to make a drawing. And so I have to make the camera, for example, look at this vitral in an angle that is not too close, because maybe the player can still complete the minigame if it is too close, but it's not going to feel pretty. It's going to feel a little bit more tense. It's not going to be fun for the player. He might get frustrated, but it also can't be too far away. Otherwise, the player can't see the vitral. And on the other image, you have more of the UI that I see whenever I try to develop, which is a ton of little tiny adjustments that you have to do to get the camera to feel right. For example, whenever I was making this presentation, I noticed something which is I was trying to get some actual good shots of the bastion through the player's view, and I realized that the camera was way too close to the player for me to actually get those shots. And so I had to think to myself, which is, this is not the objective of the camera. If I want the camera to show these bastions to the player, and if I want him to feel this connection to the world through the camera and through traveling through the bastions, I would need to make the camera a little bit farther so that he can see the whole landscape, so that he can see all of the bastion in its glory. And so it would always be just this little game of change the direction of the camera, change the angle where it's seen from. And of course, there's also the mechanics that you have to always input, like don't let the camera go through walls, or don't let the camera fly all over the place. And yeah, it would be just, it's a very long process of just playing, seeing the things, are they fun or not, and then implementing them. Next.
The player experience was also related with the bastions, but we already saw these slides. But basically, this is one of the things that Afonso was talking, related with how do you translate the bastions and the images. And for now, we are also have a contribution of André about the next part, the team management related with this project. He is here.
Now there is a big challenge that normally is. So now there is a big challenge that normally is a bit dismissed in our jamming experience. Making a game in a week or 48 hours with 4 devs is quite different than making one that takes a year with 13 people working on it. Even more when we want it to be published and to have a certain level of professionalism. Managing a team is quite a challenge, of course, and it needs above all experience and understanding about our team members. There are some things we need to have in mind. Everyone has different expectations and workflows. There are different art styles and programming styles, and everything must be integrated and work well in the end. So about this team management, all begins in the team formation process and the acceptance of new members, new dev team members. I give a lot of importance to the expectations and objectives of those that wanted to work in this game. This to make sure that everyone is on the same level, and most importantly, so that I myself know the capabilities of everyone on the team and what each one wants to achieve with this game, because those will be always will be different between every one of us. And of course, even more importantly, that everyone has the same vision and love for the game we are creating. But after this process, now that we have our team, it is important to organize it and make sure everyone has a different responsibility. There are game designers, programmers, artists, and the management overviews everything and makes sure that the team is working well and that we are achieving our objectives. Then we have the game design team. Sorry. That designs the game and makes sure every component is consistent with the main idea for the game. And finally, the development team that creates the several components that give life to the game. Of course, this is where the magic happens. Additionally, there are 2 more folders, music and narrative, that I'm responsible, but since there is only one person, I didn't put them here on the graph. So you can see, and here is our full team and our full responsibilities, and you can see that the programming and art are divided into several categories. I can put them here. The game design was led by me and Manuel Guimarães, but everyone was on the process and contributed to the final design. This allowed everyone to know our vision and what we are trying to create for this game. Something that is important to explain is that now we are divided into two teams, since the game design is basically complete, programming and art. And inside this division there are several subdivisions, as you can see here. For example, the programming team, we have two sub-teams, one responsible for the boat gameplay and one responsible for the Bastion gameplay. This team meets weekly, the programming team, all together, so we can check everyone's progress and we can give opinions, even if it's not something that we are implementing. The same thing goes for the art team, where we have these four sub-teams, and everyone meets weekly, Saturday. But although everyone has the right to give their opinion, normally the ones responsible have, of course, a bigger say in the decisions and have several degrees of creative freedom. This to allow everyone to have their personal input on a game that everybody likes. Now, all seems pretty easy, but of course there are some challenges and difficulties. The first is to unify our workflow. Every week we meet and every week we have tasks to be completed. We review them in the meeting, and if they are finished, we move on to the next one. We've been following a waterfall workflow or cascade workflow with the help of Jira and now Trello to keep everything organized. We all have different boxes, different tasks, and we check them in a progressive way. Like first we are working on it, then we are reviewing that it is finished and completed, and we go to the next one. This means that we have been following a straight line of development. First we started with the design, then we evolved to the prototypes and concepts, and now finally we are implementing the game as a whole. This methodology allows us to establish the idea, then to iterate on several concepts, several gameplay mechanics that help us to select the ones that were most fitted for our game, and several art concepts that allow us to choose the best architecture for the Bastion, the best design for characters, and the best environments. This means that even after the game design document was completed, there were still several transformations and several updates on our vision for the game, mainly visual and mainly gameplay related. But of course, such a long project has a special difficulty, a special challenge, I might say, which is motivation. I think you all know. That's the main shadow that haunts long-term projects, where we first are so excited about a new idea for a game, but then after weeks and months of development, we start to lose a bit that excitement. So I'm here to give you some tips that you can have in mind when you are working on these long-term projects, and if you are managing a team for a long-term project. The first one is constant progress. This to say that you should show, if possible weekly, if not bi-weekly or even monthly, some progress on the game development or on the game design or on the concepts. There must be work every time that you meet, so that everybody feels that you are making progress, and more than that everybody feels a little bit of pressure to deliver something, to work on a project every week. That's important. The other one is communication and feedback. That's something that I've been talking here a bit, which is everybody is in a general sense with the knowledge of what is being made by everyone. The gameplay I'm sorry. The gameplay team knows what the art team is doing. The art team knows what the gameplay is doing. And we give some opinions and feedback to every task that is made, so everyone feels part of family, of a team, and everybody knows that their work is being appreciated and is being given feedback every time they post it, be it constructive feedback or being a positive feedback. And of course, this goes to the third one, which is really important, that we are a team, we work as a team. If somebody is a bit left out, then we have to make an effort to bring them back to the team, to feel more part of our development. And that's why everybody has a responsibility to be on the meeting and to give some feedback about what everybody is doing. Not just work by ourselves, but help the others work, and above all, make sure that our game is developed and our idea is created. Of course, we have to have an organic workflow. This to say that we cannot work weekly with consistent because we are not professionals. We are all amateurs here. This is our part-time job, so per se. So everybody has their professionals' responsibilities and academic responsibilities, and we have to be organic in the way that if somebody cannot deliver this week or cannot deliver this month because it has evaluations, it has a personal problem, then it's fine. There is no pressure for everybody to be there constantly working every week, and this is really important. So there must be a little pressure for everybody to know that we must work when we have the time, but never so somebody feels almost like asphyxiated by this need to work. So we have to be organic in this workload to give, and sometimes this happens. Sometimes somebody is on a task that is not making progress. He or she is trying really hard but is not making progress. Then sometimes it's better to go to another task so that he or she has a little bit of refreshment and something new to do, so a little bit more exciting on the new task. Of course, these are long-term projects, and we have to have long-term, on the long run, objectives. So we normally what we did on the beginning of the project was to select some competitions, some award competitions for game development that we basically fixated as these are objectives that we want to go there and show some gameplay, some work. For example, the Mojo event on Dax Park, we said, well, we want some prototypes here and we want to show something so we can have some feedback from users and from players to see what we did and to give us some feedback, and those are really important so we can have basically a finishing line, because that's the difference between internal and external projects. External projects have very rigid ending lines, objectives, but normally internal projects don't have them. So we are working, and when we finish. If we have time, we have time, but we have to be a little bit more professional in the sense that we have to establish some long-term projects to make sure that our project doesn't deviate too much about what we are trying to do and what we are trying to achieve. And of course, I put it in cakes. I think a lot of you that see our chat, Wind of Berkana, already have questioned about what's about all the cakes and all the images that we put on chat. And this concept is not about cakes on its own, on themselves, but about like positive energy. Like how do I say in English? Everybody must be light-hearted about the project, and there should not be too much pressure for someone to deliver or someone to feel that they are letting the team down or anything like that. And we all must have some degree of I'm sorry, I'm not getting the word, of confidence. Thank God. Confidence with everybody, so we can say, well, this is not going well, I think you should do more this, or I'm not working well this way, I rather work this way. So if everybody feels comfortable with everybody that we are working, that there's a certain levity, I don't know if that's the word in English, but a certain, not too much pressure, not too much dark ambience, then the project has space for everybody that joins the team, work well and feel rewarded and welcomed in our project, in our team, in our concept, in creating this game. So this one, even though it's a little bit a funny theme about cakes, it's really important. So everybody feels good when working on this project. So basically, this was our presentation. I'm sorry I couldn't be present on our monthly session, but right now we have been working pretty well on Winds of Berkana, but we had some members, some developers basically going out of the project because of professional reasons. Of course, we all move on with our lives, and now we have some needs. Basically, we need now somebody for Bastion's concept design. So we have João Lopes and Bárbara Marcial working on them in 3D in modeling, which they are making a really good work. But we need somebody to make the concepts for them, to have a little bit of more artistic background and being able to concept them on a 2D scale, on some fast concept designs, so they can then model them on 3D, which is what Julia was doing, and she is still doing a bit to help us. And of course, we need a little bit more of programming in the part of both gameplay, since Patricio left our team to work on Funcom, happily. So we need somebody else to fill on his boots. He worked pretty well. He was quite a good programming. So we need somebody to help us on that part. I'm trying to help a bit more now on the boat gameplay, but I need a little bit more than just Pedro to help us make the boat gameplay work, because it's one really important part of the game. So basically is that from our presentation. Thank you all for listening, and now I think we will have some space for questions.
Okay, so as the prophecy says, these are most of our cakes that are related with this project. And so maybe if you have any questions, we are free to answer them. And well, if you have any questions, maybe Fabio can.
If we don't have any questions, I think we can move on to the next
Okay.
presentation.
Okay, okay.
Okay, so the next presentation will be about the Project Echo. I think you can stop sharing the screen. Okay.
Hello, can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Nuno. I'm project lead for Ecosystem game, name not final. With me I have Gonçalo. Say hi. You're muted.
Hi.
He's the art director for the game. So what are we going to talk about specifically? I don't want to give an in-depth look at what the game is. There are places where you can go see that, namely in our Discord project pitches. And I don't want to talk about generic things about projects because, well, we heard some already, namely the parts about team management have struck very true to my experience as well. So I won't repeat them. So I'll start by giving a brief overview of the game, just enough for the context for the rest of the presentation. And then we're going to talk about some more specific and interesting aspects, and hopefully try to draw some conclusions about our experiences so that you don't have to learn these the hard way. We'll start by talking about the art style and our pipeline for the creatures. We'll talk about the artificial intelligence we have in the game and how we do balancing and why we had to come up with a different system for balancing. But first, what's the game? The game presents you with an ecosystem. So you have some plants and some species, some are herbivores, some are predators. And your task is to observe the ecosystem and see if it's going out of balance. Going out of balance means some creatures are going extinct or some populations are out of control. So it's your job to observe this and act on it. How do you act on it? You have some cards that apply mutations to certain species, or you can change the environment itself. Cards like this creature is faster, or it's a better hunter, or this animal can now perform photosynthesis. These types of changes are most common and can change the ecosystem, hopefully in the way that you expect, and to make it balanced so that the game can go on. A few of our tenets are we want creatures to look like animals and not just numbers. It would be easier to make this a simulation game where you just see numbers and it's all very abstract. But we wanted to cash in on the feelings and the emotions that people have when they see cute animals. You can't really get emotionally attached to numbers like you can with animals. So we wanted an art style to reflect this. So I'll pass the word to Gonçalo, and he'll talk about this part.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to talk a little bit about how we came up with the art style. So we knew we wanted the creatures to be quick to draw, modular, and easy to animate. Why? Because we wanted the mutations to actually be visible. So we needed a simple way to change the animal body part, and we couldn't do that with a single sprite for every animal, because imagine this. So any mutation changes a part, and the player may see over 10 animals in a run. So an animal will have around 10 body parts. So imagine drawing every single possible combination for that. So not only would we have to draw a lot of different sprites, but every time a mutation would happen, we would have to change a whole sprite. So also when it comes to animation, with a single sprite, we would either have to animate every single sprite, which would take a lot of work, or not animate at all. And we wanted to animate. So we decided that a puppet style would be really useful for us and would hit every point. So, and why? Because we can draw multiple mutations for a body part and just change it automatically in Unity. So for a non-modular system, we'd have to draw 10 creatures and 10 variations of each. With the modular system, if we draw 10 variations of each, we get on magnitude of 1,000 different combinations, and we can apply mutations by swapping like only one part instead of the whole sprite of the creature. So puppets were the way to go. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how our art for the creatures goes from the artist to the actual game. So we are working with a puppet-like creature. So we need to find a way to easily connect every single part. So we decided to use something that is already built in Unity, and that's the ability to create an editor's window. So I'm going to try to explain it as simple as possible, how it goes from the artist to the actual game. So the artist responsible for the creatures right now is Mariana, and she plans the creature. So she draws the whole creature and to know where the creature will connect. And then she breaks it apart and she adds dots. What do these dots do? So we have red dots and green dots. The red dots indicate that something will connect there, and the green dots are used as articulation. So it's our pivots to use for the actual animation. So the program that was built in Unity will detect these points, and it knows that the red dots indicate that a piece has to connect there, and the green dots indicates that that will be used to move. So in the program right now, the program does this automatically. So it detects that and then cleans the dots to make the pieces clean. And also every piece has a class. So basically the head connects to the ears, connects to the neck, something like that. And that is already built in the class saying that this will connect to that. So it's really simple right now with this created that the programmer only has to add the piece into the game, so the sprite of the single piece, and classify it as a head, as a neck, or something like that. Because now every time they will add another piece, the piece knows exactly where to connect. So if they add a neck and then they add that to the creature, the neck knows that it has to connect to the head. Yeah. So I want to add that like this picture of the creating the editor's windows is something that we don't usually do for gems, and that's because of time constraints. But it's something that for long-term projects is really good because you spend time now, that saves a lot of time in the future. So if you guys leave with anything from this part, is that take advantage of this fixture and spend some time now saving time for the future. I think right now we'll go for an ad break and then we'll come back and talk a little about of the balancing of the game, and Nuno will take care of that.
now I'm going to talk a bit about the artificial intelligence for the game. Like the rest of the presentation, I won't go into depth on the specifics of what we do and more into the lessons that we've learned. The first lesson we learned is that you only need to be as believable as you need, and you shouldn't be more than that. So you need to see how closely the player will observe your agents. The rule of thumb is that the more agents you have, the less attention each individual one will be paid. And when I state it like this, it's a bit obvious, but the lesson is to ask this question at the start and use the answer in your design. So after asking this question, and in cases like ours, each animal will not be paid close attention because there will be tens or hundreds. So what you can do is you cheat. And the impulse as a programmer is to model things the way that they are in nature or the way that they make sense. But sometimes you don't have to go that far. I'm going to give an example of a behavior that we have in game in which animals can sleep. And sleeping is just they lie still and they are more easy to catch. But the first way that you can imagine this would be implemented is that it's just a random thing, and every now and then the animal just goes to sleep. The second way that you can imagine it is you model the energy that the animal has, and when he sleeps he gets more energy, and when he runs he depletes that energy, but if he's just standing still he doesn't deplete that much. And it's a whole thing, it's way more complex. But what do you actually gain by implementing that? It's not going to be that much more realistic because animals nap all the time. People don't really have this precise knowledge of when animals go to sleep. So if it's just random, it'll work just as well. And it has a very big con because, well, one, it takes more time to implement. It's more computationally expensive, so it lowers the amount of agents you can have. And also, there are a lot of edge cases that can lower the realism that you gained by making it more complicated. To give an example, we were having, when we had that system, if the energy of the animals reached 0, he would just go to sleep. And sometimes that happens when he was being chased by a predator. And it's very unrealistic if the player were actually watching to see like a lion chasing a gazelle and the gazelle just goes to sleep. So if we gained any realism, we lost it when we had that very blaring case. So it was even more complexity to fix that. And the other lesson is that the amount of leeway that you get in how much you can cheat is a function of how much information you show the player. So you should be careful and you should consciously decide what information the player actually needs to have access to. So I want to go a bit more into that in depth on this because it's very important for our game. And the expectation of information, there are really two things that go into play here. The first is the expectation of predictability. When the player can see information, he expects that the numbers actually mean something, obviously. And they expect that they can use those numbers to predict outcomes, which is what we do in games sometimes. Even when we don't think we're doing it, we're actually doing it. When we go, am I ready enough to fight this boss? We're trying to foresee the outcome, and more information gives us a better ability to predict this. But the other thing is that if you start giving more information, the player actually expects that you give all the information. And if there are hidden mechanics, it will be a lot more problematic if you gave more information. So let me give an example. You have these two stick figures here that we have, and they're fighting. And one of them has a fish and the other has a cob of corn. And who's going to win? At this point, you're just guessing. Maybe the corn is better, maybe the fish is better. You don't know, and so you won't be upset when one outcome happens. But if I show this example, you were given extra information, and the figure with the fish is clearly stronger in all possible measures that we were given. And so with this information, the player will now believe that the fish figure will win the fight. And if the fish figure does win, everything is okay, job well done. And it was actually positive that you gave information because the player actually got attached to this outcome. Whereas before he wouldn't be upset, but he wouldn't be very happy either. But it's problematic if the corn figure wins. Maybe the player will want to test again to see if it was just luck. The numbers are not that different. But if this result happens most or all of the time, then the player will start to get upset. And they will question, am I really this unlucky, or do corn weapons have an advantage against fish weapons and I'm not being told? Is something fishy going on? And these types of questions can really make the player upset, and you want to avoid this. So where does this go into play in our game? I'm not saying never give information. You need to give some information, like I said before. If you don't give any, then the player will not be attached to the outcome, whether that be for good or for bad. But you need to think about what pieces you want to give consciously. And in our specific case, our AI is actually quite dumb, but the player doesn't have that information, so it's fine. We show a lot of statistics about the species as a whole, but we don't give any specific statistics about an individual. We don't tell how sleepy he is, how hungry he is. And so if the AI does a stupid decision, the player doesn't really know. Finally, the last topic that I want to approach is how we balance the game. This problem is present in most, if not all, games, but here it was on a whole different scale. So what was the actual problem? We start by giving the player a random ecosystem, but it can't be a completely random ecosystem. It needs to be stable enough to last until the player can analyze it properly. But it can't be so stable that the player doesn't have to do anything to win the game. And to aggravate the problem, what we're balancing is a very complex function of the values we're changing. We tend to balance games by changing values, but we change values that are not related, or they are related to the experience, but very indirectly. When we want to make a boss harder, we make its health a larger number, or we increase its damage, or we make it do a certain hard attack more often. In our case, to balance the ecosystems, we had to change how quickly each animal goes hungry, or how good it is at hunting, at fleeing from predators, or how big each population is. And it is way too many values, and they are all interconnected. If we test an ecosystem and it's unstable because one of its creatures is going extinct, and we make it too good at hunting, then its prey will go extinct, and it's a complete nightmare. It's actually the whole point of the game, but as developers, we didn't want to make it from scratch, and it was impossible to do it by hand because each run had to be different, and so we couldn't stay and design 1,000 different ecosystems for the player to go through. So in the end, we decided we had to tackle this problem from another angle. And in our case, it meant devising a system that would do this balancing for us. So what did this tool look like? The game already is a simulation. We simulate the ecosystems. So we can just get a random ecosystem and see how successful it is. If it goes unstable very quickly, we can scrap it, get a new one. And the important part is that we can actually determine how stable or unstable we want. We're designing by the experience instead of changing the input values. We say, I want an ecosystem that lasts 3 minutes and no more than 5. And the simulations will just run and we'll get an ecosystem that lasts that amount. And this is the actual experience that the player cares about. Other things that are important about this. Very important. It allows us to change core aspects of the game without having to rebalance everything. And this was a big deal because we wanted to playtest, we wanted to showcase the game at Mojo and other fairs that we were at. So we had to have at least one ecosystem that was somewhat balanced. But if later we wanted to change how creatures hunt, then that ecosystem could no longer be stable. And so actually balancing it felt very bad to do because, we were just wasting time and we would have to scrap it eventually. Or worse than that, we would be afraid to change some aspects of the game and have to throw out work. And with this tool, we don't have to do that because the balancing is automatic. Those are the core things we wanted to talk about. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I will say that if I incited your curiosity about the game, feel free to message me later if you're interested in joining. And thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I don't know if anyone has any questions regarding any of those questions, any of those presentations. Let it be Echo or Winds of Berkana. I think you can stop sharing the screen so we can see everyone. Okay, so thank you everyone. We will end our monthly session here. If you enjoyed, feel free to join in our next session and follow us on all our social medias, which are in the description, so you can know when the next monthly session is. Thank you so much and see you next time.